Welcome to Oakle's channel. Thanks for watching today. And it is finally time that we talk about the Duskbloods coming out on Nintendo Switch 2, which is From Software's newest IP. And I waited to make this video on purpose because I wanted to see what Miyazaki had to say in his creator interview with Nintendo themselves, because we didn't really get like a ton of information from the trailer itself. And so the interview here sheds a ton of light on what this game is actually about, some of the lore behind it, some of the gameplay behind it, a little bit of the customization. And I have to say, like, initially when I heard about it, I had some mixed feelings because I was like, I don't know, another multiplayer from Software. I'm more interested in like the single player environment. But hearing about the lore and how the actual, I guess, game mechanics work here, I am far more excited about the game than I ever was. My only reservation is, what if none of my friends actually pick up Nintendo Switch 2 and I'm having to play with strangers on the game? I feel like that might hamper the fun a little bit. But let's go ahead and dive into the entire interview here and sort of put a lot of the fears at rest here when it comes to worries about the game. And so we start off here. First off, please tell us what led to this title being developed for Nintendo Switch 2. And his response: a while back, we had the opportunity to meet with Nintendo to discuss ideas. And during this discussion, we presented a rough outline for the Duskbloods. It was very bare bones at the time, more of a loose string of ideas and a proper presentation. The concept itself was very different from anything we had done before, and Nintendo seemed very interested in helping make it a reality. So that's when the project kicked off. At first, it was being worked on by a small team as a title for Nintendo Switch. However, just as the game started to take shape, we were approached by Nintendo with talks of the Switch 2, which led to a revamp of our development plan with this new hardware in mind. The new hardware's focus on online features allows us to stay as true to the original vision as possible, which was very good news for us. Now, there's a little bit of background on the game itself, but I really found it fascinating that this game was originally intended for the first Nintendo Switch, which means that this game has been in development for quite a while now, which means probably the lore and the ideas and all of that has come together very well. And also, not to mention, like, Miyazaki is the director himself for the game. I just found it fascinating how long the game has been around. But let's continue on to the interview. It sounds like the game differs from most of your previous titles. Can you give us a little more detail as to what type of game it is? In terms of structure, we consider it a P versus E title. At its core, it's an online multiplayer focused game with player versus player and player versus enemy gameplay. Then they ask him, did you always have some desire to make a P versus E type game? Yes, I've always found the P versus E structure very interesting. It allows for a broad range of game design ideas while also letting us leverage our experience of designing challenging enemy encounters. As a side note, please allow me to address one thing. As previously mentioned, this is an online multiplayer title at its core, but this doesn't mean that we as a company have decided to shift to a more multiplayer focused direction with titles going forward. The Nintendo Switch 2 version of Elden Ring was also announced, and we still intend to actively develop single player focused games such as this that embrace our more traditional style. And I really do feel like this put a lot of fears to rest when it came to worrying about the future direction of From Software, because a lot of people out there say we're getting Night Rain, we're getting Duskbloods here. Is From Software becoming a mostly multiplayer company here? And I think it's really great he's putting those fears to rest and saying, hey, just because we're doing two multiplayer focused games does not mean that the single player games are out of the picture, and most likely the next one that we're going to get will probably be along that line, because I can't imagine them doing three multiplayer games back to back to back. And so the interview continues on here. Please tell us about the game's characters and setting. The game's protagonists or characters controlled by the player are known as Bloodsworn. The Bloodsworn are a group whose members have achieved superhuman abilities through the power of special blood. As a general concept, they're very similar to vampires, but they are not portrayed as the horrifying monsters you might associate with traditional vampirism. Is that right? Vampirism? Vampirism? Vampirism. We're going with vampirism. It just sounds better. Anyway, we tried to extract the sort of romantic aspects we found interesting from concepts such as vampires and blood and reinterpreted them as the Bloodsworn. In the Duskbloods, the Bloodsworn are competing for something known as the First Blood. As human society reaches an end, first blood flows in an event known as the Twilight of Humanity. The Bloodsworn are summoned to the Twilight of Humanity across a variety of different times and places in a bid to obtain the First Blood. Due to this, there is no fixed era or location in which the Duskbloods takes place. There are more traditional Gothic or Victorian-style maps, as well as those depicting the closing years of an early modern period, like the one glimpsed in the trailer with the train running through it. And I do feel like that clears up the trailer a little bit, because when you were watching it, it did feel like different time periods throughout, and it really was hard to form what exactly the storyline is going to be. And this sort of clears it up as the idea that these Bloodsworn are being summoned across all of these different time periods to basically compete for what's called the First Blood. And then they continue on here. Can you let us know the meaning behind the title Duskbloods? The Duskbloods refers directly to the Bloodsworn themselves. As mentioned earlier, the Bloodsworn are summoned to the Twilight of Humanity in a battle for First Blood. Duskbloods is a collective term for these characters controlled by the player. It sounds like blood plays a pretty big role in the game. Yes, in the context of the game, blood is used more conceptually as opposed to literal meanings like physical depictions of injury. Blood symbolizes one of the game's key themes, the history it holds, the power it passes on, the fate it weaves, and the marker of those who have surpassed the limitations of their own humanity. And so from a lore perspective, I don't think there's anything they could say that sounds more From Software-like than saying blood symbolizes one of the game's key themes, the history it holds, the power it passes on, the fate it weaves, and the marker of those who have surpassed the limitations of their own humanity. I mean, that sounds like something directly out of Bloodborne or even like Dark Souls or Elden Ring or just any From Software Souls-like game. Probably not Armored Core, but obviously they're going in a similar direction here, and the lore is going to be just as well developed as some of their other games they've put time into. Now, the interview does continue on here, talking a little bit more about the actual abilities. It says, what are some of the characteristics of the Bloodsworn, of the protagonist in the game? There are several reasons we put the player's focus on the Bloodsworn, with one of those being character actions. The Bloodsworn possesses superhuman abilities thanks to special blood, so their actions are more dramatic than anything we've seen in our previous title. Even basic character actions in the game, such as sprinting, super jump, and double jump, are designed to be dynamic and stress-free and are contemplated by each character's own unique weapons and abilities, allowing for a wide range of creativity. Also, while this isn't directly related to the Bloodsworn themselves, the setting allows for the depiction of firearms and such, and every character is equipped with some means of attacking from a distance. I feel this is one of the game's unique aspects when compared to our previous titles. I hope these new action elements are one area that players will enjoy. So if you watch the trailer and then you're reading this, I feel like you're getting a pretty good idea as far as like how the gameplay is going to flow as far as like your individual character, and it does feel like it's a mix of like Night Rain with Bloodborne with a little bit more distance attacks at the same time. Like when you played Bloodborne, you didn't really use your gun a whole lot except to parry, and in this case, you are going to be able to actually use it as a viable source to attack your enemies, which is going to be really interesting. And also, they said not every character is going to get firearms, and so like are some characters going to possess like sorcery or magic or things like that, or maybe like the timelines that go before firearms were invented. What is their distant weapon going to be? I don't know. I'm very intrigued as far as like exactly what they're going to do to mix the combat up for the distance, but I don't know. We'll have to wait and see more on that. But they continue on. Earlier, you referred to protagonists or characters as plural. Does this mean the player will be able to choose from multiple different characters? Yes, there are over a dozen characters for the player to choose from, each with their own identity and appearance. I think there are a lot of unique elements to the character designs and the weapons they use, so hopefully players can find one or two favorites among them. Also, each character can be customized to a certain extent, allowing players the fun of building a character that feels like their own. And so yes, I know we're disappointed there is no character creation here to get an exact character that you want, but sort of like in Night Rain, you're basically selecting a class of character, and there are a lot more here, because I think it said, I just read it, what did it say, 12 character classes? Or more than 12. And so there are over 12 character classes. And then it also said we can customize the character to make it feel like our own. And so we're probably going to get to be able to change the outfit, the armor, possibly some of the weapons. I'm not sure how far the customization is going to go, but I do like the idea that you're not just simply playing with a stereotypical character, trying to work your way through it. You can develop the character in your own direction. And I do feel like that is very, very important for pretty much any Souls-like game or any multiplayer game. You want the character to be you as you're playing through it. Now, they also ask, can you provide some more details on the general gameplay loop? And he says the game has a so-called hub area where players choose their character, customize them, and enter online multiplayer. Online multiplayer supports up to 8 players. Upon concluding an online match, players then return to the hub, at which point they receive some sort of a reward, whether they win or lose. Using these rewards, players can further customize their character, and so the cycle continues. Online matches are generally last player standing. However, there are certain cases where victory conditions differ. For example, players may be tasked with teaming up to take down a powerful boss enemy or find themselves in other special situations. Alright, so it does sound like Night Rain in this aspect, because if you played the network test, you start off in the hub area, and you essentially match make with 3 other players to journey in there, except now you're getting 8 players, and it did say whether you win or lose in the little gameplay loop here, you're going to get a reward to continue customizing your character, which I do think is nice, because From Software games are very difficult, and if you just simply never got to customize your character because you weren't very good at the game, I feel like it might turn a lot of players off, or new players off, pretty quickly. And we are talking about the first true From Software game, or original From Software game on a Nintendo system, and they don't want to alienate a lot of Nintendo players pretty much off the bat. And I also like the idea that the gameplay loop is not always going to be last man standing or simply a straight PvP action here. It did say there's going to be special circumstances for like taking down a boss, and we're going to get to more here in just a second, because the next question is, so victory conditions are influenced not just by PvP results, but PvE results as well. He says, that's right, some victory conditions center around defeating an enemy boss. They ask him next, I can't think of any examples with that rule set. That sounds very interesting. He goes, I'm happy to hear that. Regardless of whether it's PvP or PvE, the idea is to to provide players with an experience that allows them to learn and hone their skills as they play. We've therefore designed the PvE boss encounters to present a tough challenge and a sense of accomplishment upon defeating them. And I'm going to keep going with the interview here because we're going to continue to elaborate on that. So players can enjoy improving their own skills over time as they battle. Yes, although there are a variety of elements in place to keep the game from becoming too stoic. For example, how players conduct themselves during the match is just as important as direct combat. The Duskbloods implements victory points, which are responsible for ultimately deciding the outcome of a match. To obtain victory points, direct combat is of course important, but it's not the only way. Some players may prefer to earn points by avoiding direct combat and instead engaging in more opportunistic behavior. How you earn points is entirely up to you. Additionally, each character can summon an entity to assist in combat, giving players a high degree of freedom when it comes to how they fight and win. Another important aspect is match variables, such as the event system. This system has the potential to alter the course of the match, such as special enemy spawns and additional objectives with accompanying bonus rewards. In the trailer, you may have noticed a giant stone face looming in the sky. This is one example of the events that can occur in a match. In this case, the appearance of the stone face affects the environment and changes match rewards, which can have an immediate impact on player motivations and objectives. These events don't happen all the time, and I hope discovering them gives players some incentive to keep coming back. And so right there, like, sort of sound a little bit like Catan to me. You're getting your victory points here, but just like in Catan, like there are different ways to win the game. You can get like the longest road, you have the largest army, you have random victory points, and of course, just simply winning the overall map. And it's the same thing here. Like you can get victory points by winning and being the last man standing, but you can also earn victory points by accomplishing like small missions throughout the map here. And I really hope that leads to like more exploration in the discovery aspect, because that's one thing I do love about From Software games, is simply exploring the map, trying to figure out everything about it. And so I really hope like some of the victory points take place on that, but also like the idea of like the giant Majora's Mask moon type thing coming down, like special events spawn, and if you go and basically approach it and try to take it out, you can earn victory points that way. I don't know, like the whole idea of like opening it up with like different ways to win the battle really got me motivated to be pretty darn excited for the game. It then says, it sounds like even those who tend to shy away from PvP can still enjoy themselves. That was the intention. I am personally not much of a PvP person, and I wanted to make something that's satisfying even for players like me. While the goal of the match is to obtain the first blood, there are personal objectives that provide separate rewards for the player as well. So I hope this adds to the fun of each engagement. And I do find that very encouraging, because players like myself are not as big on PvP. We're more focused on PvE, or just simply exploring the world, and we are still a focus in this game. Now the next question says, what other ways might players enjoy the game outside of combat? This is exactly what I was talking about earlier. One thing I love doing in any game I direct is leaving fragments of lore and world building details, allowing the player the fun of using their imagination to make connections. The Duskbloods is no exception to this. However, we've gone about it a little differently from a previous title. The fragments this time are found in the previously mentioned character customization items, their blood history and fate. Customizing a character will reveal a piece of information regarding the world and its unfolding story. And so that like leads a little bit to why these characters are not going to be completely customizable as far as like building your character from scratch, because you are discovering more about these individual characters. And I assume you play the game of all 12 characters, you're going to get a pretty darn good picture of how the lore of the overall game comes together, especially like every character is from a different time period. You collect lore based upon that character and when they lived, and you're going to be able to sort of get an overall picture of how the Duskbloods and how the First Blood all came together. And I don't know, I'm pretty darn excited for it, because I do enjoy the overall lore of pretty much any From Software game, and we've never gone in the vampire direction before, and I think it's a pretty cool way to actually discover the lore. And then they asked a question. You customize their blood history and fate. Yes, analyzing and altering a character's blood history and fate allows players to customize all sorts of things, from the abilities to appearance and inner characteristics to the role they play in the world and relationships with other characters. Focusing these elements on the concept of blood or blood history and fate allows for a deeper exploration of customization, and is another reason we placed the Bloodsworn as the protagonist. Then they ask him, do you mind sharing any other points that you personally find interesting? One area I haven't talked about yet is roles. In online play, roles give players special responsibilities and objectives that often lead to unique interactions and relationships between players based on their corresponding roles. That's probably not much information to go on, so allow me to provide a few more examples. But please note we're still finalizing some of the naming and details. For example, if a player possesses the Destined Rivals role, another player is designated as their rival, and they are tasked with finding and defeating that player. Doing so counts as achieving a personal goal separate from the overall victory conditions. Another example is Destined Companion, where one player is required to seek out another designated as their companion, which results in a special reward if they form a bond with one another. Roles can be assigned to any character via blood customization, allowing players to enjoy role-playing in a literal sense and hopefully adding to the drama of these engagements. So once again, we are really expanding past just simply winning the game by being the last man standing. There are so many ways to upgrade your character, find lore bits, get victory points. They really are taking this game to a very much of a far degree than what we initially saw in the trailer. And then they continue on here, kind of like how players can pick their roles in a tabletop RPG. Exactly. While not entirely intentional, it may reflect our own interest a bit. It might seem a little unorthodox at first, but I hope players will give it a try. And then we continue to the final question set here. It says, that reminds me, I was curious about the winged rat character seen in the trailer. Can you provide some details as to what role that character serves? That character shares a similar role to the Firekeepers from the Dark Souls series. They remain in the hub area, providing the player with advice and guidance. I suppose you could say we tried something a little Nintendo-esque in the spirit of the partnership. What do you mean by that? We tried something cute for a change, although I will say this character is actually an elderly gentleman. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we finish? In addition to creating a P versus E title, we've tried our hand at introducing a lot of new and interesting ideas with the Duskbloods, from superhuman player actions, a free-form combat approach, and gameplay that's dynamic and dramatic, to the romanticized aesthetic of the Bloodsworn, deep player customization, and fragmentary storytelling. I think there's a lot to appreciate and enjoy in this title, and I sincerely hope players look forward to it. Thank you very much for your time. And so let's unpack that last little bit. I love that the basically the hub area character to help you out is a older gentleman bat rat type fella here, and I also love that they considered it more Nintendo-esque, trying to make it more family friendly, and we're still getting a somewhat horrifying looking creature here. But anyway, I do like the idea that they are trying to expand the overall dynamics of how we're going to achieve lore in the game, how we're going to actually achieve victory points. Like I said, everything about this game sounds fantastic, and I actually am more hyped for this game than I am Night Rain, because it feels like an individual lore, an individual story is taking place for this. But the only drawback I have is at the moment, none of my friends are planning on getting a Switch or Switch 2 here. And so I'm going to be playing with strangers on it. And can the dynamics be as enjoyable when not playing with your friends or just simply playing with strangers online? We'll find out. But at the moment, or maybe there's even a single player mode. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe it's going to be part of it. Maybe they're going to pull back and put some bots in there or something with you as well. Either way, I'm excited for it. What are your thoughts on the Duskbloods? Let me know in the comments down below. Are you excited for this new title in the From Software library? Or do you feel like it's still too much of a departure from the single player titles and you're just simply not into that? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out my other videos listed up above and go out there, find a great game to play. Simply have a great rest of the day.